Yeah, so just wanted to start off by sharing perhaps the overview of my own personal experiences of say community-driven food-related innovations in Singapore. Why food-related? Because it's not just about farming, but it covers the whole spectrum of the food system. A lot of things are under-documented, maybe overlooked because I don't know if it's not important or people haven't gotten to that point. But it's interesting because the big picture is that Singapore is such a food and resource dependent place. We import about more than 91% of our food. But on the ground level, how does that look? And it only took, I only started thinking more about it when I went overseas, to think more about where my food comes from. And I would like to start off with an observation I had when I was still working in a small shop house in Little India. And I think Ananya pointed out the example of the Little India riots in 2013. So a bunch of nomadic urban farmers found themselves in a shop house, which Tian used to also be at. And it was interesting because it's around 2015, 2014, the aftermath of the riots. The place was interesting because the police were patrolling the area every hour up to like 6 a.m. In the back alleys, you have cameras, spotlights, and it was very disconcerting even for a Singaporean because you feel like you're being looked at, all the time. But at the same time, I'd like to just point out that the place Little India for what it is, and reactions from these milestones or what happened in the area itself presented opportunities for us to think about what we could bring to the space where we were at. So plainly, we started an indoor urban farm in the shop house. It's illegal, totally, because there's no rule for building urban indoor farms in Singapore at all. We were cooking our produce, which is also illegal. We thought, why not throw seeds outside? It became guerrilla gardening, which is illegal as well. So to just sidetrack a bit, I think even though I'm just talking about the beginning of what we did, urban farming and the food system in Singapore, I feel it's just beginning to be documented, and that I guess that's a plus one for bottom-up perspective because, say, policy makers are not quick to realize, not to adapt or be flexible to changes on the ground. They may not fully understand the motivations or why people want to grow things, for example. And where Singaporeans or locals or just local communities could be lacking, we can borrow narratives from, say, the Western world in terms of their own urban farming initiatives, which we ourselves borrow a lot from when we tried to adopt and build an urban indoor farm without help, really. So another observation really is really not analytical, is that it really helps for community innovation to thrive and innovation to be targeted towards the neighborhood and towards the gaps in the localized food system. We were lucky because we had different kinds of people in our space who were attracted to different aspects of the space and the neighborhood in Little India itself. And that brought about interesting discourse. And discourse not necessarily an exchange or negotiation of arguments, but discourse in that it brought about ideas that were turned into reality. Because in such a space where you will not really see, yourself having meetings in areas where there are like neon lights, because you need like LED red and blue lights to grow plants. You have designers, architects talking with urban farmers or chefs, and this richness in ideas about food as a medium for us to talk about things that are bigger than us, and food as the subject itself. It brought about such richness that carry on to a momentum, which we tried to adapt and find ways to fit into the gaps which we see around us. So when I mean around us, it's really about our day-to-day living, like our neighbors outside, on the streets. Not so much about the reality of urban farms or food security in Singapore. I think the last point is that language is important even for us on the ground, working on the ground. Because I think one aspect is that some of us were trying to share with, say, people in the government what we are trying to do, and say to think about the definition of urban farming and its importance in Singapore, and not just a place or a thing that can be just, you know, to build community and what's not. That if we were given the space to dream, there could be some other outcome that would be beneficial not just for us in Singapore, but, you know, places in Southeast Asia and around. That was very difficult for us because we couldn't speak the same language. We may not have talked to the right people. Secondly, interestingly, I think in terms of space as well. So this is the side alley, and it's a mural you see. So what happened was we just opened up the space, even though it's not really ours, to people, to, you know, barbers who just wanted to cut hair for people. And you have, you know, demand and you have supply, and we like the idea, and we are not sure if other people like the idea. It was free haircuts for migrant workers. We had signs up in different languages available. Just one of the random things we would do because we wanted to fit, kind of see how our skills could fit, like answer the gaps in the community. And where you see like the mural is, we would just throw seeds and the plants would just grow up. So you may still see it there because we didn't bother to remove it. And it's tended to by other people. It also stems from one of the ideas that food can be easily available and free for people in Little India, even though, you know, there's so much cheap food available, but still the idea that people need to know where their food comes from remains and it's important for urban farmers as well. So this is an example of how we tried to bring in aesthetics, and so we drew on the wall with chalk so we wouldn't be fined by other people. Also because we lack resources as well. We just found pallets on the streets, we picked them up, we added in soil and just plant cuttings, and it just grew out. I like to think that we brought about a mini ecosystem of sort. There were more birds and butterflies in Little India, which is quite sorely lacking in that. To end off, I like to be a bit more critical on hindsight. Perhaps it was the way we did things as a ragtag team of sorts. If we had understood the big picture, what's happening on the policy level, we could have done better in terms of aligning our jargon, maybe, in terms of the way we speak and the outlets which we could speak with people not within our community. At the same time, perhaps we could have been more rigorous in saying, figuring out what problems and solutions there could be in not just our context, but the big picture as well. And we could have designed, say, programs or collected appropriate data. But these things remain questions we do not know, and nor do we have the expertise. And I like to end off by asking, you know, borrowing a title from a movie, Singapore Dreaming. Is it possible to dream in Singapore? Because such an approach, it's not known. It could be seen as alternative. Yet I do believe, and I've seen the resilience of a community in a place where we always talk about the Gotong Royong spirit, but do we remember? The young people do not know what it is. And also structural or like real issues such as issue of funding. How could we be creative with such things, apart from getting government grants which would dictate how we do things? And how can we continue harnessing such pockets of innovation and structure it in a way that could really be amplified on an appropriate platform? And lastly, how do we practice this knowledge exchange with people apart from us, the wider public whom we would like to share this knowledge with as well? So yeah, thank you very much.